Welcome to Backstage Pass. My name is Mark Tippin. I'm the head of learning experience at Mural. And today I am very, very excited and fortunate to be here with my co-host for the week, Chris Lisinski. Did I say it correctly?
Lisinski. It's all good.
It's Guy? I said, okay, Lisinski. All right, cool. Who is joining us from the customer success side of things, Senior Enterprise Transformation Manager, an all-around amazing human being. And she and I get to geek out on NASA stuff all the time, so I really appreciate she knows at depth, and so she keeps me in the know there. So for the next 60 minutes, we're going to take you behind the scenes in an unscripted work session. We encourage you to say hi if you haven't already in the chat window. Get to know each other there. Do use the QA functionality if you have a question. That allows us to kind of keep track of it and make sure we don't lose your question. And then when we have pauses or maybe at the end, we'll be able to catch up on those questions. Our goal is to help you gain confidence in using Mural, and we try and bring you really different use cases week to week. And we hope that this type of broadcast and seeing how things and how just normal human beings like ourselves go about preparing these things will inspire you to see this as something that you can do, and you can use your facilitation superpowers with your teams as well. To help you get the most from the session, Chris and I will be calling out anything we note around functionality or best practices or interesting things to sometimes they go by really quickly and there's really interesting learning moment. And so we'll call attention to that. But otherwise, I'm going to hand it over to Chris, who's going to introduce us to our two co-host panelists. Very excited to meet you both. Welcome.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Greetings from Austin, Texas this morning. So I'm really excited to have two of our customers with us this morning who I met recently. And some of the pains they went through as they were preparing for their first workshops in Mural are actually the genesis of today's session. So today we have with us Lila Engelhorn and David Mortimer, who work for a military academic institution. And we're going to talk through a class that Lila is trying to organize in Mural, and we're going to use it as an exercise to talk through all of the implications of how you might prepare your murals for meeting and workshops. And the idea today is to tackle one of the pain points that I see with my customers all the time, which is, okay, I got it. I saw cool things on Backstage Pass. I've watched the intro videos. Now, how do I actually do this? So David and Lila, I'm thrilled to have you with us today. And we're going to nominate, you see 3 boxes there on the screen. We're going to nominate 3 volunteer panelists to join us. So are you ready? So I need 3 people to type yes on their in the chat.
Boom, there's 1, 2, 3. We got them.
3.
I'll start adding them.
Okay. So Gisela, Diego, and Paul, welcome to the panel. You're going to be consulting for Lila and David today. And we're going to pay you at the full rate, $0 for the day.
All right, we got 1. We find Diego. All right.
So you'll join us as panelists. And we ask that you turn your cameras on and fully participate.
Paul, where are you, Paul? There you are, Paul Brand. Here you go. Come on down.
This is like The Price is Right.
That's right. I'll drop a link to the panelists. Hello, good morning.
Okay.
Nice to meet you both.
Thank you, Mark.
Hey, good morning.
And Lila, we talked yesterday about the class that you were thinking about structuring. So maybe we can talk through that. You can give us an overview.
Sure thing. Thanks, Chris. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Lila, and I do a lot of user-centered design activities within my institution. So having some sort of digital collaboration tool like Mural, especially in this remote environment we find ourselves in globally, is really important for my work going forward.
Lila, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just want to, could you get a little closer to the mic? People are really interested in what you have to say, and it's just a little quiet.
How's that? Any better?
Yeah, I think so.
Much.
Yeah,
Okay.
cool. Thank you.
So user-centered design in a remote environment with a variety of audiences at a variety of readiness levels. So for standard, just a standard use case would be a class, standard university level class, professor, students assigned to the class, and they want to insert a user-centered design activity either to start their class or in the middle of their class or throughout their class as students are working on individual or group projects. Most often small groups within a larger class are split into design teams, and they're required to use user-centered design to approach a complex problem space. Chris, do you want me to give more of an overview? Just interrupt me when you're done.
I think that's good. And we were talking about this, and one of the conversations we had about this is, how do we plan this? What does this look like, and how do you get started? Because it can be a little overwhelming. Lila actually reached out through a mutual contact, and we had this great conversation before her workshop. And we thought that it might be valuable to the larger community. So I'm going to bring in, to try to put a little bit of structure around this conversation, a little bit of something that has morphed over time that I like to use with my customers, because I want to kind of guide us through this conversation. And this is a 7-step process that I have developed over time, and it's a work in progress. It's always being refined. So, we talked a little bit here. We just did step 1, really. What is the purpose and intended outcome? So this is a university level class. So, Mark, what kind of questions might you want to know from Lila?
Oh my gosh. So yeah, if I were a facilitator or a template maker that was going to work with you and help you strategize around this, it would be helpful to know, are there kind of, what's the beginning state? So what are some of the prerequisites and things, and might that lend itself to pre-work? We could do a flipped classroom perhaps and say, what are some of the things, some of the assets that we could use? Maybe people are coming back from a summer off or a different session. So what are some of the things that we can present to them and allow them to kind of reconstitute some of the things that are necessary, so that when we come together and are actually spending time together at the same time, that we're not rehashing what they could be doing on their own. So that would be one of my first questions.
In this university situation, very diverse experience levels and backgrounds. In a military academic institution, some are starting their first quarter, so they're coming back from deployment. Some are continuing on in their curriculum, so have had a full quarter of courses or 2 before this course they're coming into. And there's a wide range of exposure to an understanding of user-centered design and design thinking. Some have never heard of it before. Right. So maybe some sort of pre-work seminar they watch in advance to understand what user-centered design is.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and I think that's, I think about some of the times where we're working with teams that have heard about it or don't know much about it, but you almost start by avoiding the word design thinking altogether.
Absolutely.
And yeah. So
I often call it tools of design.
Tools of design.
How to approach a complex problem space.
Wonderful. Which that's language that sounds to me really speaks into the listening of a military audience. That situational awareness and being creative and using that. The other types of questions up front is understanding the size and shape of any individual cohort. Like how many people will be kind of going through this experience more or less together.
I'm going to give a standard lawyer response and say it depends.
It depends. Okay.
The
Is there a
activity I
range?
just completed that David and I consulted Chris about quickly in advance involved 5 teams of almost 60 participants split among those 5 teams. They each had an embedded facilitator. The total workshop had 157 registered participants from the DoD, academia and industry, and global. For a class that's coming up, I will have a classroom of 12 Marines that will eventually be split into 3 smaller groups to do a group project. There are other classes, depends upon the curriculum and school, where I may have as many as 24 students, both civilian and military mixed together. So there's 3 different groups.
Got it. Okay. And could we start to, Venn diagram this and say, this is pretty much how it works. You've either got a large number of people from, an individual branch of the military, or you've got a small focused group with a very perhaps specific objective. And then you've got more of an open mixed civilian and military where they
Absolutely.
need. Okay.
And we all want to use the same tool.
Okay. Wonderful. I think so. I think some of the strategy that comes to my mind is if we understand. We like to meet people where they are, right, and build that bridge actually from the foundation that they are, whole and complete as they approach this new topic. But you want to find ways where between those 3 personas, where is their common ground, where is their differences, and then invest up front in how you can quickly get people to a common place where then from then all of your templates and curriculum and stuff that you're doing can be more scalable. But even when we develop a workshop, there are these, perhaps it's the learning moments where you go into a breakout session. And even for us, we deal with different verticals, right? So we might have we're going into a breakout, but then the challenge question might be financial services versus a technology company or something, right? So the actual challenge we unpack would be specific to an industry, but the fact that we unpack a challenge at this point in the curriculum and do these particular steps and do a retrospective and and close and everything, the structure is the same, but maybe you start looking at how can you plug and play super relevant content in along the way so that you are honoring the fact that you're dealing with 12 Marines as opposed to, a larger group of mixed civilians and military folks in a different context.
And I would actually like to defer and add David to the conversation. He may have another use case to throw you off a bit. David?
Wow. So similar to what Ryla is describing, I end up assisting groups of scientists and engineers from federally sponsored labs, such as university-affiliated research centers or national research labs, U.S. government and Department of Defense laboratories, as well as private sector, academia, and NPS faculty or university faculty and students develop and come through formal research proposals, programs, and what are the research questions, research methodologies, laying out that very formal research approach. And this is a global audience.
So if I can reflect back and understand, does this
So
make
I think, does that make sense? Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was just, would this be An additional unique kind of persona. I mean, this is a different type of constituent that you, okay, cool.
There may be some overlap between the two because some of the people with whom I will work will participate in the workshop with Lila. And then some of the outputs of the workshop that Lila just led will feed some of these formal research themes and threads that will be going forward for the next several years.
Got it.
And some of the students that just participated in the workshop with David's stakeholders will participate in other coursework and move forward the work they did and the tools they learned in the workshop into their coursework. So they are overlapping audiences a little bit.
Okay, wonderful. So, and the end goal, it sounds like the thing that we're heading towards is they need to become familiar, aware, and have some proficiency with design thinking in a particular application space. I mean, so that's the common thread.
Common thread is, yeah, they're all using the same process of user-centered design to approach complex military problem spaces.
Got it. Could you add that mission statement as a note in the mural? Like that to me is like such a crisp way. And you said it twice now, word for word. So I'm like, that's probably something we should capture as our guiding North Star. Because it sounds like it's been carefully considered. All right, cool. So that's kind of where I'd start. Is like you always start with the customer in mind, as you do. It's design thinking in action. But I'd love to hear from some of our other panelists. What are some of the other questions that you might have? As you're thinking about how do you even get started from this goal we have and these different stakeholders? What are some of the other things that you might think of? And Chris as well. What are at this stage? What are the things?
So I was, I guess this is like the first time they're gonna get exposed to like mural. So I think just if that's a common thread for all of them. So probably having like an activity where they can, I don't know, play around with the tool and get comfortable with it would be good. Like a nice icebreaker.
Great.
And from my side, I will, in this purpose and looking at the final user of the mural, I will ask what's the purpose behind it? Is it to gain knowledge? Is it do we want to generate an emotion on them? It's more like a different type of a speech, or do we want a call of action? We want them to, after the session, to invite them to do something else afterwards. So what's the need behind it for our user?
That's a great point. Well, let's have our guest panelists answer that. Is that a single answer, or is that it depends, and we need to look at that tree as well?
And just process note, are those the words you wanted, Mark?
Oh, let's see. All stakeholders will be using the same tools and processes to approach complex military problem spaces. That sounds like a great North Star. That's the empathy building statement there.
And I was typing, so I missed Gisella's
sure.
excellent question.
Yeah, I'll mention that's one of the things we talk about in meetings like this is setting up rules that actually make it a safe space for collaboration. And we're dealing with multi-channels here, right? You're typing and there's chat and things. So I love to use this thing. Some of the people that have watched before have heard it, but they have this thing of like, I'm sorry, I was in Hawaii, right? So it's just one of the rules we set up, and you kick off the meeting. All right, who traveled to who's the last person that traveled to a fun exotic location? Where is it? Oh, Bali. Okay, great. So that becomes a code word. And then if in that case, you're actually focused on something else, because people can't focus 100% of the time in any given meeting, then you just have this, this flagging way of saying, I'm sorry, I was in Bali. And people go, no problem. And they restate the thing and bring that person right back into the conversation and keep it moving, as opposed to it being this awkward thing. And and I'm definitely guilty of like, I think I heard it, so I'm going to give an answer, and everyone's looking at me sideways like, what are you talking about? Yeah. So anyway, so I'll just restate. So the note that was made is thinking about what is the purpose, right? Is this something to gain knowledge, or are we looking for an empathetic emotional response? And is there a call to action for these cohorts? Is it one or is it a bunch? Depends.
Again, lawyerly answer, it depends.
And I think, Lila, that's fair.
Okay. Some are looking, I often in class am looking to introduce a new way to approach complex problem spaces of the future once these students leave my class. In David's case, he may be working with research teams that need a tangible, functional deliverable to move forward with. So there's a range of outcomes. Ideally in my class, if the students do a class project on something very fleet applicable that they want to move forward as their thesis project and potentially get themselves detailed to a command that's working on similar things, it could be very tangible in their future, but it doesn't have to be. My outcome is different than David's group's outcomes. But David's groups may also learn a new tool to approach a future complex problem space that they can take with them.
What are some of the other, I'm just dropping in some different colors here. So I'm trying to visualize this as not the best visual way, there are probably lots of ways to visualize this, but I started seeing we have got one central question around which we've identified some personas, and I'm trying to do the same thing here with purposes. What are some of the different outcomes that, and I don't mean to necessarily say that the colors here correspond to the personas. I'm not trying to say that, but just that there are different ones. Mm-hmm. So it seems like I heard that this might be an opportunity for them to identify a thesis project and actually give them direction in their military career on like where they would like to be advocate to be stationed, and that really they connect their purpose and their interests with the opportunities that might exist as one. That's a fantastic outcome, I would imagine. What are some of the other ones?
I will pass the floor to David.
Yeah,
because he may have other outcomes.
Sorry, I was trying to add them.
Yeah.
So some of the outcomes we'll end up with is an iterative or a research plan and technology demonstration plan that will be iterated over time. So we'll almost need to snap a baseline and then allow people to update where they are on different areas. So as we kind of do a bit of a management of that effort. In addition, I like what Giselle had mentioned was we will end up taking from this formal or action to submit proposals to various sponsors, to science foundations, to research sponsors. And so there will be a set of deliverables that will get spun off from this so that we can get the funding, the technologies, the institutional review board permissions. And then we have to start. Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, so in a way, it's almost like the course could be, I mean, if you folded prototyping or something into it, it could be a way for them to actually start getting some traction and go into those initial meetings with some research fundamentals under their belt.
Concept, yeah.
Proof of concept
is ideally what we get out of the initial prototype and field experimentation.
Right, and one of the things Amanda is asking is, how you would use this tool, how you would use Mural to pitch services when the outcome is a call to action.
For instance, last week in our workshop with a very strong creative constraint of time, they started Monday, they presented on Thursday morning. They had 7 hours of concentrated concept generation and development time. Those teams that used Mural frame by frame as their visual aid, their presentation tool in a virtual environment on Microsoft Teams. So they shared their screen, click through frame to frame to articulate their concepts.
You mean they didn't take it all off into a PowerPoint presentation? They literally did it off. They tidied this up and used it as their communication medium.
One team exported it and created a PowerPoint with their Mural frames and altered it into a more military framework.
Yeah.
2 of the teams went straight from Mural and did frame to frame, and another team used a different product. Actually,
And
3
one of the
teams.
things I want to call out, yeah, and one of the things I want to call out here is if you were presenting out and from Mural, is you could use the outline functionality to create something that feels like a presentation mode, so you can natively present in Mural and not duplicate your work.
Can I go back to a question for
please.
David and Lila about this context? Because what's emerging here on my screen with Mark transcribing what you're saying is a really diverse set of possible forms this thing could take, depending on all these different personas who might show up and all these different purposes they might have. And I'm just wondering how much control you have or don't have about the homogeneity of any individual cohort of people. I mean, could you end up with a large cohort where most of them were scientists and engineers, and then there was a really small set of people of another kind in another corner? Or are you able to shape some, so, you might have a cohort which is this small group like the Marines, and then you might have a really big cohort with a civil and military mix. How much can you manage it so that it's either a small, tight focus of similar people with similar thinking, similar context, and as opposed to another cohort which might be really, really diverse?
There is a range of control that either David or I have on any particular ad hoc design team.
Yeah.
For instance, my workshop last week, registration opened in July for anybody and everybody.
Right.
And they were to submit a bio or resume. I reviewed all those and placed them on teams. So
Right.
I was able to control for diversity of perspective on teams.
Right.
So I didn't get all aviators on one team or all Marines on one team. I tried to spread them out. However, in situations where I come into a course at the university with pre-registered students, and it is a course required for a particular Marine-focused curriculum, I'm going to end up with 12 Marines. They may all be different flavors of Marines, but they're all Marines. There's not a lot I can do there. So I have no control there.
Right.
I have,
but somebody else in a sense is partially pre-selecting it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And David may have a different experience.
That's helpful.
I'll say that in some instances, we're able to have a fairly homogeneous team. Yes, different flavors of scientists and engineers, but maybe from a certain field, let's say neuroscience or material science. Sometimes the diversity, though, comes from if they work in academia or private sector.
Yeah. And
certainly when we add international perspectives to that, how those disciplines are defined and just the lenses through which people view things adds its own variance, even if they were all mechanical engineers.
Yeah.
I was going to say there's an element of this too, which is, design thinking seeks to involve diversity. I mean, beyond the HR checklist thing, you're really trying to get that diversity of thought, and I've experienced workspaces where, back when we all used to be in offices, where one team might be in a huddle and someone would walk down the hall, they would just grab, it didn't matter if they were in finance or legal, they would just pull them into the room and say, I'll give us 30 seconds. This is what we're thinking. And then just get this completely different perspective on something. And so in some ways, the aspect of these cohorts coming together and not being completely homogenous is part of the learning and the broadening of what's possible as well. I'm sure perhaps you've seen that over and over again in your courses.
Yes, and Mark, I would like to bring something that Lila mentioned. She said, sometimes we don't know our audience beforehand, right? Sometimes it's new and we are in the workshop, we're starting with them, but it's just new for us. And that's fine. And you said, Mark, that there is this flexibility that we can start the workshop. And Diego, you mentioned an icebreaker, something that helps us understand about them in the same workshop, and get to know them a little bit better, and we can customize as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I will sometimes, if I'm a facilitator in a room, start with a molecule map to not only get them used to drawing and getting ideas out of their heads. Initially, people use a lot of text, not a lot of drawings, but we get there. But just to expose their perspective, their immediate assumptions and biases, just get them out in the room. And that helps me get to know who I'm working with. I have them all identify the user, because they all have a design challenge. Who's the user here? Who are you solving for? Where's the human? That's in the top box. Immediately, just based on your guesses, what is their need? And immediately, just based on your experience, what solution would you propose? And that immediately shares with me where they're coming from. And then sometimes it's useful to go back at the end of our process and go back to our original molecule maps and see how much things have changed or how much have stayed the same.
That's perfect. I want to connect. Molecule map is not a term I'm familiar with, but I'm thinking, is it like a mind map? Is it,
kind of. It's 3 dots. I'll try to spend some time while you guys discuss drawing it somewhere here, because I've got to use a different laptop to do this part.
You bet. No, yeah, I'd love if there's a new thing. I'd love to understand it, especially now that I get the context from you both about where it's adding value in a discussion. That would be really helpful. So I want to back up just for a second and say this has been a really interesting way to unpack one question from Chris, right? At the very first start, we're just like, oh my gosh, there's actually more here than one. So, it's a reminder that to do these things right, it's not enough just to show up on time and drag something onto a canvas and go. It's something you really need to craft. And I'm delighted that we oriented so quickly to the people and meeting them where they are and really being in service of that learning. I think that to me just speaks to this fundamental value that facilitation in general adds, and how desperately we need more and more facilitators, people that are willing to kind of take on this work, this thoughtful work to make these things successful. Because you're going to have a room, in some cases, how many we say, like 150 people, right? That's a lot of people spending a lot of time. And if you just try and wing it, or read it, you read lecture notes from 3 years ago, and that's such a missed opportunity. So I wanted to just ping back to Chris and say, so that was your first question. Is there anything else that you think we could expose here, or might it be valuable to start moving ahead a little bit? Oh, it looks like Lila's got this.
And I think, Mark, while you're zooming in on that, I think there's something I want to call out here. So there's something we understand about level of effort at Mural. So if you are doing a 1-hour workshop that happens once, you're not going to take the time and energy to unpack something at this level, right? So you want to match level of effort. But the other thing I'd like to call out is there's an art to this whole preparation and understanding. As a facilitator, I've done a lot of workshops. And when we don't take the time to understand in advance what our goals are, what success looks like, and try to at least go through some sort of process, those are the workshops that we get bogged down, and we don't get to consensus. Things don't happen. And Lila's nodding her head because I'm sure she's been through that too. We try to do something quickly, and when we don't take time to understand, our aim might be off, and we might hit an entirely different target. Did you like me tying that back to a military analogy?
Thank you. I appreciate that, Chris. Yeah, and the other outcome in those sorts of situations for me is that my students leave with a different view of the toolbox I just shared with them. They may never open it again if they don't see the value immediately. So starting when I'm just introducing the toolbox, starting with a very simple challenge, managing expectations, something that I know they can get to an endpoint in the amount of time that is allotted for this project, is essential. And this molecule map, I want to say, came from my experience facilitating with some folks from a software design company in Silicon Valley. This was a tool that they brought with them that I then adopted in my work. So we all adopt tools from other people's toolboxes that work and we might use them in a different way.
And I think there's something really valuable there for the larger mural community, is really about thinking about when you first expose mural to them. First impressions matter in everything in life. So that's why, Lila reached out and we worked really hard to make those first workshops successful, because it's hard to get someone to give you a second chance. So that preparation is really important. And I'm probably going to butcher this name, but I think it's Jaron said that their experience is that ratio event versus quality preparation is 1 to 3. A repeat event is 1 to 2. So it's kind of an interesting perspective that I wanted to add in there.
I think, that's an interesting point as well, as we look at the first time we do any of this, and Backstage Passes is kind of repeatedly putting ourselves in that beginner's mind and starting with a blank canvas. And so we might end up projecting this bias that it's always this intense amount of work. But I think it's one of those things that this is part of the crawling before you can walk, before you can run. And I think the more you get practiced at doing this, then there become your own kind of mini and micro practices that you can accelerate certain phases of this. Like even just having access to things like this, a molecule diagram. It's like, this is now part of my visual vocabulary, right? This is something I could pull out and use, whereas I might have stumbled around some affinity diagramming thing. This gives it some form and some. So the more you practice this, it's like the more your wood shop gets these new tools that you can just use, get your hands on, and get that specific job done much quicker. At least that's been my experience. Yeah.
Something I want to kind of add on there is I'm going to pull out something from my content library in the spirit of reuse. Mm-hmm. Something I built that addresses one of the comments in the chat is that people are coming in for the first time, they haven't used it. So over time, I've evolved this little agenda bar and getting started. And I use it in my workshops. And because I also added it to the outline, it automatically throws it in the outline view. So I've got this thing that I can reuse. And as you facilitate and build workshops, you're going to reuse things. But I usually put this as the left-hand side of a mural I'm building. So a time-boxed agenda so that everybody knows our expectations, where are we going? And I really think to get started, that there are 3 things that they need to know. How do I navigate around? Murals can be pretty large. How do I get around, whether I'm using a mouse or a trackpad? How do I add a sticky note? They will discover icons and GIFs and GIFs, depending on what school of thought you're in, and some of the more advanced content. But let's start with a sticky note. Let's not make it hard. And how do I collaborate and move things around as I'm working? Those are really the things that people need to know to get started. So, some of us who've used Mural for a long time, we tend to do things we think of complex, elegant solutions. It doesn't have to be, is what I wanted to say. And you can templatize stuff like this to help you.
And Chris, I wanted to address a question in the Q&A, how to use a molecule map as a warm-up. Mm-hmm. And everybody can use it differently. I posted a picture, I moved the molecule map up, and you can see a picture of the outcome of one team. It doesn't have to be pretty. They take out whatever paper they have. It is a welcome to the room. Tell me about yourself. This is their introduction to the rest of the team. And you can use it as the user, in this case, was them. Who are they? How would they phrase their stakeholder group, their archetype? What would they label themselves? I am an operator. I am an engineer. I am a scientist. So you can use it that way as an introduction. What is my need? And what do I want to get out of this? I need a solution. I need a process. This is a work development thing for me. So you can use it as an introduction in the room. And then you can also use it as exposure, like I said, for me, getting to know people and their experience in the problem space already and what their assumptions and biases are. And that's what this is an example of. Who are you solving for? What is just based on what you're bringing in the room without any more research, what do you assume their problem is? And from that assumption, what do you propose as a solution? And for me, it also introduces them to, it's sometimes easier to use a piece of white paper than yellow paper. And it's easier to read when you back up if you use a fine point Sharpie than a little tiny ballpoint pen. Just those kind of tools too. It's a warm up to the space, a warm up to drawing, a warm up to using a big old pen, and a warm up to, you know, maybe I could use fewer words if I put a picture in that. And that it's going to be messy, and that's totally fine. Still useful if it's messy. You don't have to be a fantastic artist. So that's how I use it as a warm up of just the process in the room.
Now, by way of contrast, I've yet to run into people who accuse scientists and engineers of being overly expressive and being overly artistic. So Lila has a way of drawing out from people their theatrical and creative side. What sometimes I've had to do is to create a practice, and I have to go through and title it, Practice Mural, Please Mark Up. Please post a copy of your most recent or paper that you've enjoyed recently and explain why. And almost give them several days of exploring the tools. Okay, I'll type this because the personality sets with people with whom I tend to work can be, I want to deep dive, I want to write a bunch, not be quite so picturesque. Some are, and that's wonderful. But by doing that, it also helps reveal the latent artist in the room, if you will, and gives insights when we get into the actual event, how to draw those inputs out of them.
That's right.
David, something I want to go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was just going to yes and plus one that very good friend of mine is strategic consultant, and he said one of the most powerful things that I do is we invite these people into these spaces, and they have these 360-degree whiteboards. They call them kivas. They're wonderful. They're rooms basically where you're surrounded by drawable surface. And the first thing he does is he hands a big fat dry erase marker to the CEO or the exec or the gentleman from the DoD and says, "Show me what you mean, draw it." And when they start getting it out of their head, then their team goes, it's actually, this is a little bit different than that. And it completely pivots from any apprehensions about how's this going to work and what methods and everything. It just starts flowing, and the alignments, it almost like builds the agenda as well. Like, well, clearly we need to have a discussion around this thing where there's not alignment, and this stuff we can feel good about the work we're doing. But it's all that getting them past the, I'm not a drawer, I'm not an artist, into you have ideas and you have these conceptual tools. So circles and boxes and arrows. That's enough to get started.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I say something all the time in my sessions, and Lila shared me some of the outputs of her workshop. And one of my aha moments is, remember, it's okay that not everybody has a pencil and a tablet. That they drew on paper and took a picture of it with their phone. Use the tools that we have. I tell people in trainings all the time, look, they took our crayons when we graduated from kindergarten. Mural is about giving them back. It's okay to use color. It doesn't cost extra. Express yourself. And whatever that looks like is okay. It needs to be safe.
Yeah, wonderful. Paul, I saw you. Paul, I saw you raise your hand. So,
but I just wanted to drop something in, and I don't want to go too far back in the thread of discussion.
Yeah.
Part of that discussion we had in the last couple of minutes was about, helping people enter in and use the tools so they can interact well. And we focused there on the fact that some people might be unfamiliar with Mural or unfamiliar with these kinds of tools. My experience at the moment is we have a new group of people emerging who might come to workshops who are now, after COVID lockdown, getting used to using collaboration tools, but they've used other ones. They've used Miro, or they've been on Jamboard, or anything else you could list. And a new one seems to be entering the market about every 3 weeks. And I think that's now just part of the context in which we find ourselves working. And all the tools are, of course, looking at each other and copying features and doing this kind of thing. And so you have the mix of I had a session recently with another workshop with them soon, with some people who just were, IT IT phobes who were reluctant to use anything, and then you had people who had done this kind of thing but with a different tool.
Right.
And I just think it's part of the context we live in now. I didn't know whether that's an experience that other people had had. And I shouldn't have worn a blue shirt with my blue background, should I?
That's very, it's like you're being beamed aboard.
Yeah,
It's wonderful.
I have to get the distance from the screen just right, and then it behaves. But if I move about too fast, the computer can't catch up.
That's right.
So
Well,
what about the experience of people who coming in and they've all got a mix of experience and they're constantly trying to translate from some other tool they've used to this?
I have an opinion, but I'm gonna wait and see if someone else has
Proving that your opinion would be, well, they should all get on Mural because it's the best. But
well, actually, beyond that, my opinion was I'm first and foremost a facilitator.
Yeah.
So I always go to deep empathy with the people you're describing. I'm like, so I would try and constrain my activities to something very simple, so that I'm starting again. I look for the Venn diagram. What is something that's common to all tools? Adding sticky notes or something. So I would just start and try and build. I wouldn't jump right into some complex matrix and a voting session and all that. I just wouldn't assume that they'd be comfortable with that at all.
Yeah.
But start with some. We do things like we call it dancing cursor party, because everyone's cursor is visible to everyone. So sometimes you just have a surface area and you have people just say, move your mouse into one of the quadrants to kind of show your, so there are ways as a facilitator, right? I start with some of the fundamentals and trying and get people to understand that this is not an opportunity to lean back and just watch a lecture. It's something where your participation is fundamental to not only your own learning, but this shared experience. And the quicker I can get them to see, oh, I play a role here, and then lean forward, the better.
Yeah, I would like to add that the way I'm using Mural today, I use it for workshops. Of course, I love the canvas that they have predefined. I also use it to drive collaboration because I love the timer box. I love the voting sessions that we can do with that. Even small things like the feature of celebrating and adding that color, I don't know how you call that, but celebrating in Mural with that. Even those type of features bring something different to the line. But when Chris mentioned about the outline, I also use it to present. Not only for collaboration and bringing people into a workshop, I also use it as a presentation tool. I bring all of my sections into that outline, and I use it as a presentation mode. I even give the link to the participants.
Mark, it's already in the outline.
Oh, it is? It's not showing for me.
Oh.
Yeah, interesting.
Sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Gisela.
No, that's okay. So I like to give them the link so they can join me as I'm presenting. And sometimes you can see that people can follow you if they are in the mural. So they don't really need to watch the Zoom presentation. They can follow you as you go along the different sections. So I love that option as well. And seeing the cursors is something that personally motivates me, but I like that other people would prefer not to see the cursors, and we also have that option, to hide it. So I love that flexibility.
That's right. Well, again, we tried to focus on the facilitator as a key persona. Like there's, the participants need to participate, but really the facilitator is the one that has this agreement to take on more. Like, I'll learn more about the tool, I'll learn more about how this stuff works, and I firmly believe one of the biggest favors we could do facilitators is actually allow them to turn off functionality, for other people, so that the only thing that the CEOs in the room can do is just add a yellow sticky. That's all you can do. Don't get bogged down in image searching and an outline, so I think that's an ongoing journey of actually learning how do we help people become better facilitators, or how do we meet them where they are with the skills and just give them the tools that makes that easier. Herding the cats, summoning and following, and timers and things. So thank you for your comments there. Chris, when you added this stuff, it happened really quickly, and I didn't see in the thread if we had any questions, but I just thought that was an interesting thing just to highlight, especially since we're talking about the effort it takes to do it the first time and then how to start scaling this. I just wanted to mention that one of the new features on the site is a content library, and here you can see, I have some of my own parts that I've built, and it took a long time, not a long time. It took me 10, 15 minutes, and I'd prefer not to waste that time over and over again. So I can just simply take this thing and drag it out onto the canvas. And these, you end up building your own fun custom Lego parts, and then you can reuse them. So for people that maybe have, a brand department that's very concerned about the colors and things being on brand, you can actually start building these assets and managing your own things you do. Like we're always numbering stuff. So how handy is it just to have those numbers ready to go and color them, and you're off to the races for numbering steps. And this is the things that I think it takes a little bit of effort to do it the first time, but then something, functionality like this, users are never going to use. I mean, maybe in a prototyping with advanced users or something, but really that's something that's there for people that do this all the time.
But I always have faith in my user that they will, once they learn the basics, there are some super users that their brains work in amazing ways, and allowing my team members to explore on their own. They teach me things all the time. And Diego had a comment I wanted to go back to. He had his hand up.
Oh yeah, please.
I feel like we've been talking, I guess, like broadly speaking, I think we were focusing a lot on the audience in the beginning, and that's something that I do, like before setting like a presentation, like, well, who is the audience? And I actually have this framework called the Golden Triangle, but I think about my intention, like my desired outcome. And then I think about my audience, right? Like what is their intention? Like what is their desired outcome? And then basically like the higher level solution is basically like what forms that triangle, similar to that molecule diagram, Lila, that you have. So it's a Venn diagram. But yeah, thinking about your audience, and I think Mark, you were mentioning like the functionality, being able to quiet down a CEO, right? So that it gives space for other people to be able to speak up and collaborate and contribute. I think that's a very valuable thing. So
yeah. Working visually, I think it's I love Chris here. They took our crayons away and we're giving them back. I think this is, we're realizing, design thinking had this renaissance, and for a long time, the detractors would say, oh, that's people playing with Post-it notes, right? And what's the big deal with Post-it notes and everything? And I think now we've moved beyond that, where people realize Post-it notes is just how you get something out of your head, and you actually have to commit. The scary part is you're committing it to a single statement, drawing, sketch, or something. And when you put it out there for everyone to see, it's no longer yours, it's ours. And so now we start negotiating reality. And I think what was happening in a lot of cases is people are used to a particular way of managing and controlling, command and control, as opposed to leveraging a network, leveraging the genius of everyone in the room. And so there were some of these things that people had to give up, ways that they marched the team forward with a PowerPoint in a very rigid structure. And now it's like, I know companies that have wrestled with, the agile discussion. The teams become agile and you say, well, when will this be done? It says, we don't know. What we can tell you is what we're going to work on next week. And we can tell you how much of that we actually got done based on our velocity. And people are like, whoa. This is, how do we show our metrics, and how do we talk to Wall Street and all this? But in the end, this discipline has shown over and over again that the ability to pivot and the ability to respond to VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, it's like, that's Agile's much better than waterfall. Let's start planning now and deliver a year from now. It's like, world's totally different. So that's a great point. Did I do justice to your molecule map? No. This is, you said Golden Triangle is.
Yeah, the Golden Triangle. It's the solution is usually at the top, and then my intention is at the bottom left, and their intention is at the right. But it talks about like the work that has to go in, right? Like right before like making one of these workshops. Yeah, you have to think about like, put yourself in the audience's shoes, and then you can have like different like personas in that audience. And then once you start the workshop, like you've all said, like there's going to be people who are going to engage more. There's going to be people who are just going to like highlight. There's going to be people that are going to be quiet. So how do you get everyone to contribute, and that's really like the challenge. And like you said, it's a lot of it is out of your control, but you can steer the conversation, I guess. So yeah.
Like that very much. And I have a question, Mark. So I like what Diego is bringing to the table, like the preparation beforehand the workshop, and also the pre-work that we talked that is necessary, that you had in the first structure. I love what Chris had, like the how to use Mural, and that's during the workshop, right? So if we are in the workshop, you add those indicators and like a guidelines for them. And you can have a warm-up like Laila mentioned, like that molecule. I love it. So you can understand your audience as you're going through the workshop. My question is, now if we focus on the content, so we have a goal for the workshop. How do we balance out and what have worked for you in the past to make that happen, to have that warm-up, to understand your audience in the beginning, to make sure that you bring that goal executed, like Diego was saying, right? You actually, you put all those intentions and you make it happen. How you work with that balance?
So it's interesting, and that was a lesson I learned very in multiple painful experiences where I was trying to connect with everyone in the cohort, and I was trying to honor everyone's unique vector through the content, and that didn't scale. That became super stressful because I was trying to deal with everyone's nuance. So what I do is I use that, I actually try and form a partnership with the people in the room, right? And so I need them to engage, and I need them to kind of hold in their minds and in their work the state of this cohort. And I'm not the only one responsible. I invite collaboration and discussion. So if we hit a point and it makes someone think about, Susan or Tom had this interesting thing, I start encouraging these people to start making the connections between themselves. And one, that's a wonderful, powerful team building and psychological safety thing for the cohort to understand. I can't just back off and then let everyone do the hard work, and I'm going to be the person that comes in and critiques at the end. It's like, nope. Their methods like round robin and things that get people collectively owning the ideation and the critique and the iteration of ideas. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but it's like you do want to unpack, but then you want to invite people, one, to be aware of what they said. So you might have said some stuff, but maybe you weren't listening to yourself. So be aware of what you said, because you need to own your success in this class by drawing connections and raising questions and helping us better even understand as we evolve. So that's kind of how I learned out of, disastrous initial results where I was just frazzled trying to make it perfect for everyone. It's not, it takes teamwork, and the facilitator really needs to. Sometimes you're a coach standing in the sidelines and offering advice, and sometimes you're the conductor that really needs to make sure, nope, you're only going to have 5 minutes, we're going to do this, then we're going to go this for 2 minutes, and you really need to. And sometimes you're just the catalyst. Sometimes you're just there to put the couple drops and get things going. Like, all right, let's go. Sometimes, and you have to move between those three roles all the time. I want to be.
You're perfect pivot there. So we're right at the top of the hour. So before you drop off, feedback is a gift. We'd love to know how we did today. And if you can drop us a comment in the chat on a scale of 1 to 10. 0 is we totally missed the mark. 10 is we blew it out of the park. Let us know how we did and any feedback you have. And I really want to thank Lila and David. This has been the best part of my week. So love having these conversations with you.
Wonderful. Yeah. And once again, I love the finding the common threads. Like, as facilitators are listening to these conversations, they can know that the skills that they're building can apply very broadly, even in, maybe many of them have never thought about working, in a military context or in a scientific context or something. You realize these skills can really help teams, and facilitation is such a broadly applicable skill. Thank you so much for coming today. Appreciate it very much. And Chris, thanks for co-hosting today.
Thanks
did
for having me. This is fun.
bit. I think we did Haley proud.
Yes, thank you, Chris and Mark. I
Exactly.
really enjoyed it. And thank you to the panelists and everyone else who joined and chimed in chat.
Wonderful. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a safe weekend, and we'll see you next week. All right.
All right,
I'll
take
hang
care,
on
everyone.
and
Have
let
a
the
great-
comments go. All right. Thank you.
And Chris and Mark, for you, the couple of things I posted at the end are things that I share with people who've never been exposed to design or approaching complex problem spaces in this way, to demonstrate to them, because what makes sense to them in their experience is graphs and charts. So
Mhm.
this is a picture that I took of something that I didn't create, that was posted above a copy machine in a workroom in an internal windowless room. And
love
it
this.
spoke to me,
Oh,
what it feels like to go through that problem space, poking around in the dark corners to define your problem.
yes.
And there's just so much there.
Love that.
And
Yeah, I think
it's not sourced. It's just, it's a picture that I took of what was on the bulletin board above a copy machine.
I love
Some
that.
of the best things are posted above copy machines.
That's
Right?
right. That's
I'm
right.
trying to follow
Yeah,
you to find it.
and
This
I
is the
love
mental
that.
processing type or the other one.
I appreciate you sharing that with us, Laila. Thank you.
And the
And
other one
thank
at the
you for
very top-
volunteering.
Oh, absolutely. The other one at the very top is something you'll find just by Googling process of
Oh, yeah,
innovation,
yeah, yeah.
the innovation
Yeah.
squiggle. There's several different models, but to show them visually what it's gonna feel like, it's gonna be uncomfortable. You're gonna
Right.
feel like, oh my gosh, why am I wasting my time with this facilitator? This is going nowhere. This is brainstorming without a purpose. But once you get to that definition, so the concept point is where I pull it out and say, just like you would on a Google map, okay, here's the expansion of that little region. But once you get past that, you're all in. You're like, this is going to be amazing.
Wonderful.
love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
No problem.
Thank you.
I'm going to shift gears as we all are in the land of never-ending Zoom meetings or team meetings or whatever.
Yeah, I gotta get on to other stuff.
I'm gonna warm my coffee and go to it. But I'm so energized from this morning. Like Chris says, this is the highlight of my week here to be able to
Really
come
good.
on
Thank you very much,
and
guys.
learn. You bet. Take care,
And there's
Paul.
another one
Take
next
care,
week.
Teresa.
Thanks.
That's right.
There's another one
Every
next
week.
Nice to meet you all.
Every week.
Every week.
Every week.
Thanks.
All
Take
right.
care.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
everyone.